Hello and welcome to another episode of Sacred Pause, the Self Healers Podcast. I'm so excited about my guest today. He is a perfect example of a self healer. Um, he really is. He really is. And he's also the host of the podcast, Student of Intention. He's a creator, a writer. He's the author of an upcoming book called Five Buckets. He's a poet and he's an optimist. And without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Bobby Dysart, to the show. Thank you for taking a sacred pause with us today.
Ooh, I love that introduction. Love that energy, Kelsey. Not to mention, it's Friday, so I'm ready. Thank you so much for letting me join Sacred Pause.
You're welcome. And I meant to acknowledge you about something in the intro, but it just slipped my mind, so I'll do it now. You really are a great example of that the fact that we are creators of our own reality. You know, you've been in the corporate world for probably most of your career, and then pretty recently you felt that it was no longer for you, and like most people don't do this, you actually took action to get out and to follow your dreams and follow your heart and follow what felt right to you. So thank you for doing that, because you are paving the way for other people to do the same.
Well, thank you for recognizing that. I mean,
It's huge.
and it's not easy. It's been really challenging. I mean, not just in my own sort of occupational pursuits and the challenges that go along with shifting gears a little bit late in my career, but also how folks know me. Right? I've been in sales leadership for over a decade. I've built sales teams at early stage startups, later stage corporations, and even started my own consultancy a couple of years ago. And yeah, like you said, it's in its infancy. In September, I was like really itching to write a book. I've been wanting to write a book for a long time, and since then, that was sort of like the first shoe that dropped. And I was like, there's some more stuff I want to experiment with, and it doesn't necessarily fit into how I spend most of my days, at least how I've done it for, again, the last 10 years. But I'm going to lean into it, pull that thread a little bit. So thank you for recognizing it.
Of course, of course. Could you have done both? Could you have written your book and stayed in your what would you call it, a startup sales? Like what like should I say startup world or corporate world? What feels best to you?
Let's go with business world. How about that?
Well, you're
But
still
but
like a
yes,
businessman, I feel like.
that's right. And yes, and I still do, right? I still do. But to say that I haven't made space for what I'll call my creative pursuits without sacrificing a little bit of what I'm doing in my business pursuits, I think would be short sighted. I definitely had to make space, time, energy to say, I'm going to turn on this creative brain, and then start to sort of show that person to the world as well, so that I can invite people in. And it's actually what I deal with this every day. I'm still dealing with this. I would say I've kind of gone through a transformation within a transformation, which is like, at first I was like, I've got to go be this totally different person. I've got to go be this artist. I've got to go be this author, and I have these visions of what that human being looks like. And a lot of those visions mean, all right, I kind of got to stop thinking about transactions. I got to stop thinking about, business growth, and I've got to just focus all my energy in this thing. And that's just proven false. Like, I've kind of proven that wrong in my own world, where it's like, I thought I could sort of just get rid of that human being in lieu of
Mm-hmm.
this other one. And no, I'm still me, that, for better, for worse. And if anything, it's been a positive. I've carried a lot of that knowledge, that experience into this world. And just recently, I've started to realize, like, there's actually a beautiful way that this all sort of fits in together. Still figuring it out, but that's actually, like, I'd say the number one thing on my mind right now is like, okay, I'm still me. How does all this work together? And I'm getting a little bit more clear on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So can you walk us through the process? Like when you decided you no longer wanted to be this leader in the business world, And, did something happen that triggered this, or was it a slow process? You were kind of realizing it until you could not listen anymore.
Mm. Well, I'd say it's definitely like a phased approach, right? If you think about my career, I've I opened up my first startup in 2012, which in order to do that, I had to leave a very comfortable 4-year career at a company where I was the general manager, and so that was like first phase of like me saying, hey, I'm going to go throw away one thing to go experiment and kind of grow in this other thing. Like with many startups, I crashed and burned. It failed. I was about a year and a half in, and tens of thousands of dollars lighter than I went into that. And, I didn't have regrets, and it was growth, and I learned from that.
Mm.
And then I spent, I'd say, I guess like the next 8 years sort of licking my wounds, learning a little bit, but still, keeping myself in that corporate, I would say it was like a corporate startup world of, companies of different sizes and kind of growing through that. But knowing wholeheartedly, I eventually want to go back into entrepreneurship. And the next big like moment for me, I'd say, where I really said, I'm going to go away from this, was I had reached my career milestone within the startup world that I had really hoped to reach, which was I became a VP of sales at an early stage startup. And only to realize like, okay, this isn't quite fitting what I want it to it's just not how I want to experience life. And I had to walk away from that, and that was really hard to walk away from. It was a good title, it's a good company, it's great pay, and I walked away the day before I got married. And
Oh, shit.
I went on a honeymoon for 2 weeks without a job, without a lot of direction, just sort of an idea for consulting. And thankfully, I have a partner that supported me in that, because that made it a lot easier. And then I started consulting for 2 years, and that was much closer to sort of me filling my occupational pursuits and my time with how I want to. Um, and again, then the next sort of phase came about in September, where I was like, it's there's still something missing, and the action I took was to write a book.
Okay, I gotta know. Can we talk about the book? I was gonna wait till the end, but I want to talk about the book. Okay, your book, The Five
The
Buckets.
book's the source of everything. We got to talk about the book.
Okay, perfect. So, Five Buckets. First of all, explain that. What the hell 5 buckets means, and the writing process. I hear that writing a book is one of the hardest things someone can do. Is that true for you?
You know, well, let's start with defining the 5 buckets. So the
Sounds
five
good.
buckets is a framework for living with intention, and that's the subtitle of the title, to sort of round it out a bit. And the 5 buckets framework came to me during a retreat in Idlewild, California, again in September, and it was this framework that I adopted for myself in the moment. That was the first like real concentrated personal growth event that I had ever gone to. And it was awesome. Like it was something that I went in wide eyed and curious. I'd just gone because a friend invited me, a friend who I respect, a guy named Kenny Borg. And I sort of went in there, just was like, you know what? COVID was really tough on me. 2020 was a weird year for me. I lost a lot of clients. I drank too much. I got a little just away from myself and how I want to spend my time. So I'm like, I can go do this thing and see what happens. And in doing so, we were doing the personal growth stuff that maybe a lot of us should do. We were doing hour-long meditation ceremonies. We were doing sharing circles. We were doing, challenges like, ice cold bath plunges and breath work and yoga and long hikes out in the hot desert and all kinds of stuff. And we were told to write a lot of stuff down, and I didn't think of anything all weekend. And then during this sharing circle, one of the guys was singing this song called uh, "I Pure" by, I always forget the guy's name, but it's called "I Pure." And in it, he sings this beautiful lyric, "I pray for guidance." And for whatever reason, that him repeating those words, I pray for guidance, just struck me. I literally like broke down in the middle of this circle. And it was because I was like, it was this relief. It was this like crying of relief, it was this emptying of like, man, guidance. That's what I've been looking for. I didn't
Mm.
even know it,
Mm.
like, little reassurance and like how I'm spending my time, how I'm doing my life. And I was just like, it was just nice to hear that and have that realization. And then this framework popped into my head. I wrote it down. It's this idea of writing 3 intentions across 5 areas of my life on a weekly basis: relationships, creativity, health, learning, and work.
Mm.
And I reflect on my experience across those intentions at the end of my week. And I instituted this framework again, just coming out of that retreat, out of guidance, out of sort of necessity, something I sensed I needed. And after 7 weeks of doing so, I learned so much about myself and so much about how I was spending my time and how else I want to spend my time, that I felt compelled to finally write a book. And I wrote a book about my experience, about the framework, and what potentially others can get out of instituting the framework in
Mm.
their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll answer the second question, but I just rambled on a bit. I want to give you a little space to respond, and if you have any other follow-up questions.
So relationships, work, what are the other three? What are the other three?
Relationships,
Yes.
creativity,
Creativity. Okay.
health, learning, and work. Those are the 5
Hmm.
buckets.
That's amazing. It literally covers everything important. So bravo. I like that.
I hope
I'm gonna
so.
read your book. I'm gonna read that book for sure. Wait, so are you inviting everybody to write down different intentions every week? Like let whatever flow, like 3 intentions for each bucket, and it can change and whatnot?
100%. Now,
Okay,
when you
okay,
say
okay.
inviting people, you mean the readers?
Yeah, like recommending the readers do this for guidance, really.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I
Cool.
mean,
I like that.
I say in the book that guidance lies in deeper connections with our experiences.
Mm. Say that one more time.
Guidance lies in a deeper connection to our experiences, to our
That's
actions.
deep. That's deep, Bobby. That's deep. I like that. Wow. Is that like on the first page or is that kind of entangled in the whole book?
It's entangled in the whole book, as far as I can
Okay.
remember. I wrote it.
Okay.
I don't think I've memorized it.
Okay, so now walk me through the writing process. Was it as hard as people say?
So it's a great question. It's a great question, and I paused to answer it because, I've done a lot of hard things in my life. I know people go through a ton of hard things in their lives, right? When I think of difficulty, I think of like tragedy. I think of sickness. So
Mhm.
writing a book, sort of like, I don't want to just ignorantly say like, oh man, it's the hardest thing. At the
Mm.
same time, the challenge for me that I think revealed itself, I would say, is twofold. One is, I guess it's threefold. One, definitely like the work that goes into clarifying what the heck is in our heads is really, really challenging, right? It's one thing to think of it, it's another thing to get it in a way that is expressed so people can dissect it. People can understand you, right? The other side of that coin is that it's a big thing of vulnerability, right? It's like really revealing um, something that's really important to me, something I think the world needs, and something I hope people accept with love and gratitude. And we don't live in a world that's always ready to accept things with love and gratitude.
Mhm.
And then last but not least, actually the hardest thing for me, or at least like looking back, was I'm a person of action. I'm a person who gets, I'm very excited. I'm very driven. I want to get things done. And in being so driven and so like, okay, once I start this thing, I'm going to finish it. I would say I almost rushed it a little bit. I almost rushed it a little bit because I didn't want to lose steam. I didn't want to be one of those people that started something and didn't finish it. I'm sure there's tons of people out there that start books and don't finish it. And in doing so, I just was like, I just I was like hammering at it. And it was like sort of unnaturally trying to bring it to its conclusion.
Mm.
And I've learned from that experience. And if I were to ever write a book, another book, which I think I will, I'm going to be a little bit more patient. I'm going to let it breathe a little bit, not too much, right? I think that's a positive that I kept that momentum. But I'm like, there's a little bit more of that book that I could have teased out of myself that will never be written.
Hmm. So when you think about the book, do you kind of feel a little incomplete? Or
I
are you
wouldn't say.
happy? Are you happy about it? Like that
Oh,
is just
yeah. I mean, I think that the other thing that I've learned about intention, about life, about writing books, is this beautiful word paradox. I love this word paradox. Now, both things can be true. You can be
yeah.
super happy, and my happiness definitely dwarfs all other emotions when it comes to the completion of this book. And I could feel like it's a little incomplete. There could be a little bit more in there. But what won out is my happiness, and what won out is the need for it to be completed, the need to share it with the world.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, but I want to just dive into one thing a little bit deeper. What had you rush it at the end there? Did you not trust yourself that you would finish it, or what? What was it?
Mm. No, so it was multiple things, right? So when I think of rushing, I think of the first 10,000 words that poured out of me. Like I blitzed through that. I was like, man, I'm on a run. I can't believe I'm writing this thing. It's on a Google Doc. It was literally just on a Google Doc. And I had this idea. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write about the 5 buckets, write about my experience. It's got to have a beginning, middle, and end. And so I just cranked out a manuscript that had a beginning, middle, and end. And I, I knew it wasn't as long as I wanted, but I was like, yeah, it's done. It's done. It's awesome. It's done. And then I got an editor involved, and she, oh man, I don't write this book without this human being. She does a great job of sort of saying, hey, like, can you clarify this? Can you clarify this? I want to know more about that. And that sort of that forced the process of me slowing down and me unpacking it a little bit more. Um, the rush, so the rush part was there in the beginning, and then the rush part was I had this point where it was after she had sent me that feedback, and I went through this grueling revision where she basically made me take the end, put it in the beginning, and like I had to undo what I considered a complete
Mm-hmm.
project, and that was just brutal. It literally took me like 3-4 weeks, and I would go in there, and sometimes I would sit there for 4 hours and not write anything. And I would just be so frustrated because I was like, no, I'm redoing something that's done. Like, no, F
yeah.
this, man. Um, and that was so hard that when I finally got through that and I gave it to her, she just did what she's supposed to do and gave me 2 or 3 other things to do. And I was just like, F this. I can't give
yeah,
it,
yeah.
I can't give it another calorie. I can't give it another second. And I told her this, I was like, I don't know if I can finish this thing. And she's like, no, this happens. Like, just take a few weeks. And again, to answer your question, like what was really driving me was my own like expectations
Mm.
of what this thing should be, how long it should be, how long it should take. And so then like I kind of overcame my expectations, and I was just like, but I just need to get this done. And I got it to a point where, again, I wrapped a bow around the end, and I knew it had a beginning, middle, and end. I knew it was much more advanced than it was. And so I was like, let's ship it. Let's get this thing done.
Nice.
But
then that
yes,
okay.
it's the expectations piece. So next time I go into a book, like I just want to manage, and really when I go into anything, I
Yeah,
think
totally.
I think expectation management is a big thing. It's a big deal.
Yeah, having expectations. I was talking to Paige. Paige, I was going to say my partner, Paige. Oh yeah, Bobby used to be Paige's boss, by the way.
Tell the
And
listeners this is a community pod here. We
this
know
is
people.
community pod. She said you were a really good boss, by the way. So that's cool. Um, now I forgot my thought. Thank you, Paige. Yeah, expectation is huge. If you go into anything with expectation, I mean, are you ready to be what's the word? Not satisfied?
Disappointed.
Yeah.
Disappointed.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like keeping I don't like saying keep your expectations low. It's like don't have any expectations. Be open to it all. You know,
Mm,
all of it in any area of your life. All 5 buckets. That's the way to go, I think.
that's right.
Um yes. Okay, so I'm so jealous. I want to go to a retreat and then have a book idea just launch into my mind. I'm so excited for that point in my life. That's my intention for the next couple months. How do you like that?
I love it. I love it. I would argue that the intention needs to be one to receive, and if you show up, what you need to come will come.
Oh, I show up. I show up.
You just show up. That's
I
all you
show
got to
up.
do.
I
That's
know.
all any of us got to do. We just got to show up.
I know. Okay, so do you have like a motto that you live by?
I mean, the one that just I repeat all the time now
Yeah, what is it?
is and it's in the book. It came from writing this book. It's don't wait, start small, learn as you go.
That's so
That
good.
that's all over everything I put out there now, and it's what I love about it is again it started with me, and it ends with me. That's my own model, and I hope it helps other people. But yeah, to answer your question, that's the one.
I love that because it goes against, when people start new diets or want to start exercising or want to start that book, all the things. They say, "Oh, I'm going to start Monday. I'm going to start Monday." And we wonder why majority of the world fucking hates Mondays. So yeah, don't wait, start small, learn as you go. Fucking brilliant advice. Brilliant. You're
That's
good.
right. I think it um, when I talk about intention with folks, it sort of naturally brings up goals or outcomes, and it's important to make the distinction. And I do in the book, I do in everything that I do because I actually think goals and outcomes, those are cousins of expectations, right? And
Mm.
we as a society are so outcome focused, so success focused, so like we're just always looking at the finish line and never really getting interested in the road to getting to that finish line. And so when I say that motto, I want it to be with respect to anything, right? You just brought up if somebody wants to start a workout plan, right? They usually say something along the lines of not only do they want to start Monday, they want to start a plan. They want to start a program. They want
Mm.
to start running 8 times a week or something. It's like they're already thinking about the long-term commitment. My dog's barking a little bit. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
They're already thinking about the seventh, eighth run as opposed to just what's that very first moment of putting on your shoes, going outside, going to you know enjoy the sunshine, get your breath huffing and puffing, listening to the city streets or your favorite song, and trying to just experience that moment for what it is and nothing more. And
Mm.
and go do that, go enjoy that, go try that without expectation, and then see where you're at from there. See if you want to go do that again, or if you're like that doesn't serve me. I want to go try something else.
Totally. And it doesn't even need to be like 8 runs a week. And like this person who probably sets that goal for themselves probably hates running too. It's just so backwards. And you're a poet. We both know. And when you just said what you just said, it reminded me of this poem I heard you read on your podcast about when you went out. You live in Manhattan Beach, I believe, Newport Beach,
You got
and
it.
you had your bike, and then you were going and you had like a goal of 10 miles, and then you wanted to turn back home, but then you didn't, and then you just felt amazing after. Do you remember that poem?
It wasn't a poem. It was just a newsletter, but I think you're
No,
talking
it was
about
a it was for
I,
sure a poem.
I mean, I assume you're talking about the experience machine. Would be my guess.
I don't know. It was a podcast episode just about, I think it was about like presents. I think it was about presents. So that's
Well,
definitely a poem, Bobby, and I wanted you to read it, but you're acting like you don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You should have let me know beforehand.
You're so
Um,
creative. It's just like you do that. That's a key right there. Like doing something full throttle and then letting it go. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
that's all right.
But are you looking?
I am.
Okay.
I
Well,
assume you're. Well, go ahead.
Well, so we can just talk about your relationship with presents because I feel like that's your jam.
It is my jam, and what I really like about I can say it's my jam. That's nice. That's good recognition. It is my jam. Um, yeah, that's funny. I've never thought about it that way. I think of it more as just something I'm really curious about and something I'm really nerding out on. And what I like about, and it was an unintended consequence of practicing the 5 buckets, was this idea of presence.
Mm,
And I think presence is something I've always been interested in, but every piece of marketing material that's ever talked about presence for me talks about meditation, and meditation in the traditional sense of sitting, back straight, eyes closed, what have you, right? Sort of trying to focus on your breath, right? To connect to your mind and ultimately connect to source. And that's still something I want to continue to practice. It's something that, but it's something that's always been challenging for me. And what I found is by naming intentions and getting to like the smallest moment of an experience and going for that run like I just suggested, and going showing up intention with nothing more than just to enjoy that experience and being curious about how, basically going to that run with a mindset of discovery as opposed to a mindset of like knowing how this thing is going to transpire. It 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 started to develop this awareness, this presence in me in other things that I did. Much like I gather meditation does a commitment to meditative practice. Um, I think again, and I think you were referring to this moment I had of presence on a long bike ride around this area of my house called Back Bay. And for that day, I set out to ride 2 loops of Back Bay. A loop around Back Bay from my house takes about 14 miles. And I wanted to double it. I had never done it. I wanted to do 28 miles.
damn.
And even a person, even a student of intention like myself, I naturally, go to set out for this thing. And that first 14-mile loop, I'm just sort of lost in thought. I was really in shape at the time. I'm just cruising on my bike. I'm riding really fast. I'm jamming out to, I think, Eric Prydz and some kick-ass DJ music. And as much as I'm having a great time, I'm also like just very lost in thought is the best way to explain it. And I get to the point where I can either continue on the loop and take a right, or I can take a left and go home. And I don't know, I just had this feeling of like I was getting passed by cars. I'm on PCH, is a really busy road. And I sort of felt, for some reason, I got this sort of icky feeling that I was like unsafe and that I should probably go home. And I was like, and I'm
Mm.
kind of tired, and this ride just didn't meet my expectation. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I set out to do this. I know I have the time. I'm just going to do this. And literally in this split second, I decided to turn right instead of turn left. And it was like a trigger switched. It's really fascinating. About maybe 2 more miles down the road, I just suddenly had this moment of realization. I was cruising down this hill just below these cliffs on each side of Back Bay. And Back Bay itself is just this beautiful, protected environmental marsh that looks like it just doesn't belong in the middle of Orange County, but it's been protected for so long that all the development's not going to touch it. And
Mm.
I was just like so present in the sense that I started being enamored with this moment and just overcome with gratitude. Like I was like, I thought about, I remember specifically, I looked down at the gears and I was like, man, think about, I remember what triggered it. My seat started to wiggle,
That's right.
and I had tried to fix my seat beforehand and I didn't quite fix it very well. And so that seat started wiggling. And I was like, at first, my reaction was like, oh man, if this falls off, like I got to get off and fix it. And maybe I have to ride home I have to ride home 15 miles without a seat. That sounds pretty brutal. Um,
Yeah.
but I was like, so I can go one of two ways with my thinking about this. I can think about this as like a negative and like think about all the negative things that can happen and sort of be like, man, this is just my luck. I'm on my ride, blah, blah, blah. Or the way that I did take, I was like, I sort of was zapped into this moment of thinking all the things that were going right for me to enjoy that moment. Not only was this seat hanging on, but then I looked down at the gears and I'm like, man, there's a lot of failure points in these gears. These gears could go wrong at any given moment, and this bike stops working, and my beautiful journey is literally over. I start thinking about my body, and I'm like, man, my body is just crushing it right now. Like my lungs and my heart and my glutes, everything is just working in perfect harmony to allow me to propel through these Santa Ana winds while I'm just enjoying this beautiful sunshine that's also here. It was like a immaculate day. We're on this finely, tuned road. And I even went as far as to think about the technology. I'm like, man, what a lucky dude. Like these AirPods are streaming this awesome music from this device that's in my back pocket. Like all this stuff is built so that I just get to have this exact moment exactly how it is at this moment at this time. And I was just like, my mind was just blown about that. And I'm like, man, like if I could realize that about life, more often than not, it'd be pretty tough to think of anything else but love and gratitude.
Mm, thank you. See, you remember it. But
Yeah.
but on your podcast, you really did read it like a poem. I was in my head, I was like, "Oh, that's a beautiful poem. I love that." So, bravo, bravo, for real. That was really great. Wow. So have you ever had moments like that when you were in your, corporate startup business leadership roles where you didn't really have your own life going on? If that, I mean, that could have been
Mm,
wrongly said, but I know that usually when you have roles like that, you have to do a lot of shit and you don't have much time for yourself.
yeah, it's a good question. Um, I mean, I'm sure I did, right? I've been writing poetry my whole life. I have probably 50 poems hidden inside my phone's notepad, and so that's sort of always been a creative outlet that I just put away. I remember very distinctly in college, I wanted to study English. I wanted to go nerd out on Brit Lit and all the poems by the greats like T.S. Eliot and William Blake. And my mom had a candid conversation with me. It was like, you know, those people don't make money, Bobby. Go to business school.
Oh
What are you doing?
gosh, man. Yep.
And so I did. So I did. And really since then I sort of just leaned away from this creative side of me in lieu of being a successful business person. And I guess to get to your question, like I think I just, of course, those moments still happen, but I wasn't leaning into those moments, and I wasn't leaning into taking care of myself either. I think what's been fascinating realization, another one about this transformation the last 7-8 months is how valuable I still was as a sales leader. Paige mentioned I was a good boss. A lot of people looked at me as a good boss. I always found myself in leadership positions, and I had a lot of impact, and yet more often than not, I was not taking care of myself, and I was doing my best to still take care of people around me, take care of organizations around me, take care of customers around me, but I was doing it without focusing on myself. And now I'm like, man, I can't believe how successful I was, how impactful I was, in spite of like just at the end of the day, not taking care of myself, not having moments like that, not showing up to the world the way that I really wanted to show up.
And then how did your life and your relationships, including your relationship with yourself, change when you really did lean into your true self?
Hmm. Well, it's gotten a lot simpler. It's gotten a lot simpler.
Mm, totally.
Um,
Yeah.
I think going back to the outcome focused nature of not just, I think, our culture as human beings and our culture in the United States, but certainly our culture in sales and our culture in business. Um, I've shied away from that, and I focused on the the day-to-day process, and particularly taking care of myself. I sort of know that if I take care of my diet, my exercise, and my sleep, just about everything else can be sacrificed.
Totally.
And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people, not just me doing that, but them to even consider having that simplicity of their life. But I would say that's just the biggest change. Full stop.
What do you mean when you just said people are uncomfortable with you doing that?
Um
Uh-oh.
let's take my wife for example. She'll kill me. She's gone right now.
Okay, okay.
Um
Oh god.
she's a very driven executive, and she will, she approaches her work with brute force. More time is better. More hours means more productivity. Pushing harder is the only way to push. And
Mm.
I think she's probably softened a little bit on that over the years, but she's living with a person who just candidly, and I used to think that, but I don't think that's true. I don't think any of those statements are true at all anymore.
Yeah.
And so there's a little friction in our household sometimes with that approach to work. And then certainly some of my mentors and peers and people I work with, for me to boil success or productivity and sales down to the simplicity of taking care of ourselves, it's just received with different perspectives, and a lot of them disagreeing.
Mm. Well, does she take care of herself?
She does.
And we don't
She
need to talk
does.
about this if you don't want.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. No, it's actually really funny. And our relationship has gotten really strong, much stronger over the last few months, particularly
Nice.
because of this. It's just us figuring each other out together is really what it is. She actually got me. She got me into wellness in the I think traditional sense, and what I mean by that, she introduced me to acupuncture. She introduced me to sound baths. She introduced me to yoga.
Mm.
All
Mhm.
on down the line. So things that you would maybe consider traditional wellness activities, she was way ahead of the game. And like I remember, like my first year dating her, I was like, "You're just some weird hippie. Like I don't even know what you're doing. Like what is all this stuff about?" And
Interesting.
now, to fast forward, us to have conversations around what we just discussed. It's just kind of fascinating, and I think there's also a dynamic of like, hey, I've been there, done that. Like, who do you think you are? And that perspective, me kind of jokingly is hers. So yeah, there's a little light on our relationship.
Well, she sounds awesome. She sounds like she just like is all in on freaking everything.
Oh, she's
Yeah.
amazing. She's
And that's
amazing,
obviously
and
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, she's taught me so much. I mean, that's I used to value most about our relationship, sort of our ease of companionship. She was the first relationship in my life that we just got along, dude. We liked the same music, we liked doing the same things. She was super independent, so she didn't depend on me for her happiness, and I just wasn't used to that with other relationships, and so we just
Mm.
we just sort of worked. We just
Mm.
walked in stride very quickly. But what I've grown to appreciate even more is she's 5 years my junior, and I joke often that I think I'm still on like my second lifetime and she's on like her fifth, because she knows so much more
She
than
is, yeah.
me, and she's educated me, and she's educated me in the best way possible, which is like sometimes she doesn't even have to say anything. I just pick it up from her. I pick it up with how she approaches her days, relationships, etc. And yeah, she's a special woman.
Hmm. So nice. Yeah, I met her once at that some party back in those days, like once, but I
Well,
really only
work
remember
party.
your dog.
Bernie, the guy running around here.
Yeah, Bernie, and he was eating all the cake and shit, and he was a little puppy at the time.
He's an energetic little dude.
Oh boy. Okay, so I've been wanting to ask you. I think you'll have a good story for this one. What has been your biggest challenge? Your biggest challenge, and how did you overcome it?
My biggest challenge, man. I mean, my biggest challenge is the same biggest challenge that it's always been, and that's overcoming fear. Um,
Love it.
I,
Let's talk about it.
I'm Yeah, it's plague. I literally consider it a plague. Like it's something that's
It
annoyed
is.
me
Yeah.
about myself for so long. All the way back to I remember I was a big wrestler in high school and in college, and I no matter how good I got at this sport, and I worked my butt off at wrestling. Like I don't even know why I did, but for some reason I just got super fascinated with the sport and working my tail off at it. But I distinctly remember my senior year. My senior year, I was in insane shape. I was like, I put so much effort and energy into this sport. In every tournament I showed up to, I was the number one ranked dude. Like I
Mm.
was bad. I was the man there. And everybody knew it except me. It didn't matter. I remember sometimes I would be ranked number one, and the person who I'd be the top ranked person always wrestles the least ranked person, the worst ranked person, early in a tournament. Um, and I always still looked at I over analyze the person, like what their record is. They have a losing record. I look at it like, and I would just always assume like, man, something could happen, and I'm going to lose this thing.
Mm.
And I would be terrified going into matches. And it was hilarious because everybody who knew me at the time thought I was the most cocky human being in the world and thought I was super overconfident. And who knows, maybe that was just a projection I had to sort of like be a defense mechanism for my own insecurity. But I always thought I was going to lose. And I do think it cost me some, some matches from here, from time to time. Like it cost me performance. And I carried that, I've just carried that my whole life. No, and again, nobody really reflects that to me. Everybody thinks I am just this ball of confidence and just super outgoing and what have you. And no, like, dude, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be speaking in front of a sales team. It could be a podcast. It can be writing a book. It can be whatever. And man, I'm constantly overcoming fear.
Mm. So how do your when you say overcoming fear, are you feeling anxious or is your mind just overthinking? Well, how does that look?
Mm. Yeah, I would think it's twofold. It's overthinking like worst case scenario for sure. Like just bad things are going to happen, and then B, it's freezing. It's like I just don't want to go forward with whatever it is. I'm not going to do it, right? Um, Actually, just to bring it back to wrestling, I remember there was a on the way to a tournament. Now this was a little earlier, so it was a little less accomplished in this sport. But I
Okay.
remember I told my mom I was sick. I lied to her and said I was sick because I didn't want to go to this tournament because I was terrified of losing. And my mom, good on her, she was just like, "No, you're not sick. You're
Okay,
going to
good.
this thing," and she pushed me into it. Um, but yeah, like I think that that happened again when I was writing my book. I told you I after not only I think I only told you one side of the story. I told you the story of how hard it was to sit down and rewrite that second revision. The other hard thing was like I sort of lost all of this just like I was riding this high in the beginning of like, oh, I've got all this stuff. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna write it down, I'm gonna get it all out. And once that sort of momentum just sort of ceased, all I had was these thoughts of like, it's not any good. Like, what are you doing? Who do you think you are?
Mm,
You
mm.
can't you can't write a book. You're not an author, bro. you're a sales leader. You're a tech guy. You're not this human being, let alone write something about intention. And,
Mm.
um, and yeah, it definitely got to the point where I literally just didn't look at the document, and I just distracted myself for several weeks, only to eventually just be like, dude, there's no way you put all this time and energy into this thing and you're not going to finish it. I don't care how scared you are. Um, so I got through it.
So you use the word legend a lot. You called me legend in my email. You called me and Paige legend when we called you a couple weeks ago. So you seem to love this word. So how do you define a legend? And you keep saying you have all these fears. You know, you have your mind telling you shit that's trying to push you down. But a legend to me is someone who doesn't who hears that but still, progresses, moves forward despite the fear. That's what it sounds like you're doing. So, yeah, you feel me?
Yeah,
So you're
I
doing
do.
great. You're saying these are your fears, but they're not stopping you. And that right there is the key.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for recognizing it. I mean, I wouldn't, I'm glad you picked up on legend. I say all kinds of things. I say champions. I say friends. I say, you know, that's just me. I'm a man of quips and positive language. And,
Empowering
um,
language. I love it. I love it.
yeah, yeah. And I'm a bit of a goofball, as Paige can attest to.
I
Um,
can too as well now.
but,
I feel it.
but yeah, I think that's right. I think, you know, particularly in the startup world, I actually talked to one of my mentors and friends about this. His name's Kerry Ransom. I had him on the podcast, and he sort of he sort of projects this idea of fearlessness, particularly when it comes to building businesses. You got to be fearless. You got to do it. And I'm like, I kind of called him out on it. I'm just like, Kerry, and this is a man who, when you look from the outside in, you're just like, okay, if there's anybody that's fearless, it's definitely this dude. He's open and successfully exited, plenty of companies. He now runs a venture studio in Orange County where he incubates, 20 companies that he's helped put millions of dollars in, a bunch of, sweat equity, and making, he's trying to make, or nurture the next, evolution of young technical talent by way of producing great companies here in Orange County.
Mm.
And he says a big part of it is not having fear. And I was just like, I think that's bullshit, dude. I think you're scared. I think you have fear.
Nice.
I think every one of us has fear. It's not
Yeah.
about absence of fear. It's about being aware of our of our fear, I should say, and developing practices that make us, stronger, more intentional in how we approach things, and give us context to how to put that fear where it is, to manage that fear. Because our perception is usually a lot different than our reality. And if we have, if we practice things enough, we can start to understand that difference between
Mm.
the perception that we have, the fear that we have, and what actually is there.
Mm. Yes. Wait, you're not going to tell us what the man said back to you?
He Yeah, he was kind of uncomfortable because this was on a podcast, so I'd
Of
have to
course
go
he
back
was.
and listen. Yeah, and he's, this is super, just a man with a reputation to the highest degree, and somebody I respect so much, so much. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm sure he handled it really, really well, because he handles everything really
Yeah, yeah,
well.
yeah.
Where I think he basically said, both things are true. He's like, yeah, I understand that. There's actually, yeah, now
Paradox.
I 100% remember him saying, yeah, of course I have fears, right? But
Okay, good.
they're just much less than they used to be, and much different. They don't really associate with business, because he's just seen so much around business that his
Mhm.
fears, when somebody starts their first company, they're probably filled with tons of fears. Whereas when he's on his 100th, whether it's as an advisor, an investor, or an entrepreneur, his fears are just a lot, they're just a lot more mitigated.
Yeah, and then fears, you can have different fears in different areas and they can transform into different type of fears. Like he has no fears in business, but I bet you he has some fears in other areas. But that's
That's
not
right.
what we're talking about. So he has no fears. So yeah, that's very interesting. But the key is to, like what you said, develop practices and tools that strengthen your self-love and your self-trust so you could have the fears but do it anyway. But that you really do need to take care of yourself to trust that if you do that, you're going to be all good. Even if you fail, you're going to be good.
Mm.
So what's your relationship with self-love?
My relationship with self love. You are just bringing the heavy hitters today here, Kelsey. Um, my relationship with self love is, I guess, just again a lot closer than it used to be. And
Mm.
I would say my new realization with self love is, and I think you actually talked about it on your podcast. I saw this the other day when I was perusing your Instagram. Is it does for me, the feeling that comes up is like, oh, am I being selfish?
Oh,
Am
yes.
I
Oh, I love it.
am I doing too much of this self love stuff?
Yeah.
Am I doing something wrong by, like, taking care of myself, worrying about my sleep, worrying about my diet, worrying about my exercise? Am I just like going too far inward? And that kind of goes back to what I said about how people are uncomfortable sometimes, or some people don't disagree with that simplicity. I think there can be an element of, like, from the outside looking in, of like, oh, he's selfish now because he's just always worried about himself.
Yep.
um, and so that's probably my newest relationship with self-love, or the most recent, where I'm like, I gotta figure this thing out.
Totally. Totally. But yeah, I grew up. Did you grow up like this? Well, you probably did because you just said what you said. But I always thought that if I put myself first in any area, I'm talking any area, I'm selfish and that's
Mm,
bad. But really, I'm learning more and more that that is just taking care of yourself, because that's all it is taking care of yourself. It's the most selfless thing you can do. And if you are fully taking care of yourself, that's when you show up the best to your wife, to your husband, to your animals, your kids. Like that's number one. There's nothing selfish about it. So I'm on a mission to change that definition and just flip it back to how it belongs.
100%. So I'm going
Yeah.
to ask you a question, Kelsey. Why
Yeah.
do you think that that's not normal? Like, why is that such a novel concept? Why is it not normal to have self love? Why is it not normalized to be consistently going through some sort of self discovery when so many things are normalized, right? Like, watching television is a pretty normal thing.
It's so hard now to watch television. It's like nothing's good
Right.
anymore. It's very odd. That's a side note. That is a complicated answer, but the first thing that comes to my mind is when people have children, usually, not all, but parents, they at some point they think that child that child needs to do what they want. Like, I know what's best for you. Do this, do that, do that. If you go on your own path, you're selfish. I know what's best for you. So I think it kind of all stems from that. And then when the child grows up, they put that on their children, and it's just an ongoing cycle because they never had the freedom to take care of themselves. They don't give their child the freedom. Unless they experience that freedom, how would they know to share that freedom with their children? Like,
Mm,
you lead by example. So if your parents didn't give you that, it's going to be hard for you to find that gift to give your child unless you're doing the work, unless you're surrounded by people who are, doing the work, the real work, which is healing yourself.
mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Does that make
I think
sense?
it does make sense. I mean, I don't want to stretch you too much because I'm sure you don't have the answer, and I definitely don't have the answer, but I agree. Like, I think it stems from that child parent relationship. Yet, okay, why? Again, I would just go to that. Then why are parents like that, right? Why is that sort of the natural way of order? Like, why is that the natural order of things, where parents
Hmm.
imprint on their children this idea of self-love is selfish.
Well, I just feel like that what I just said just cycles back to the beginning of time, and then maybe like kind of pack mentality. Like
Mm.
you take care of, like we're all taking care of each other. Like we're all a pack. Like that's like kind of the animal instinct in us. Maybe I don't know. You did stretch me. I'm stretching.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just fascinating because,
It
and
is.
by the way, we're very aligned on this. I often say, at first it was this idea of living with intention, and then I sort of evolved the language I use to enjoying the pursuit of purpose, and now my recent most kind of chipping away at this idea of what I'm trying to do is this idea of normalizing self-discovery. They all play
Mm-hmm.
into each other, but that's the most recent realization. And again, I just I everyone I talk to that is doing the work on themselves, we ultimately usually come to a moment where we're like, yeah, they didn't teach this in school. Like, I learned a lot of things about a lot of things, and yet I didn't learn about gratitude. I didn't learn about intention. I didn't learn about the importance of self care. I learned about science. I learned about math. I learned about history, all up through the ranks. And it's really fascinating that a person who I consider myself well educated, well parented, very taken care of, and yet, at 30, now I'm 37 years young. It's like I'm just now diving into this work. That seems a little off, and something that I hope between you, me, and the rest of us out there, that we get people started earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there schools like that out there that are teaching this now? I want to look into that because that is just vital. That's just vital. Like at least have a one class in these children's school that they have
Yeah,
to attend. So
I'm sure they
yeah,
exist for
I'm
sure.
sure, right? I hope so. My God. Or else I'm gonna have to do something about it. And that sounds like a full-time job. So my whole focus with you, with you, Bobby, was talking about your transition from the business world to self realization world and whatever comes of that. So, what advice would you have for people um, who are feeling it? That, like this isn't right for them. Like their position is not right for them. They've maybe been in it for their whole lives. They know they want something else, but they're so scared, whether it be because of money or they don't know what they want to do, but they're just not happy. Like, what advice would you give them to hopefully help them out?
Mm. Gotta go back to the mantra. Don't
Yeah.
wait. Start small. Learn as you go.
Yeah. 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 You're right.
Action is always the answer. We think way too much about what it's like to do things, experience things, change jobs, etc., as opposed to feeling what it's like to experience these things. And to be clear, I'm not saying if you're in a job and you're thinking that that's the problem and that's the thing that's your constraint, I'm not saying go quit that today and go run and become a monk or something. What I am saying is add something to your life, add an experience, be it the smallest one you can think of, the smallest thing you can commit to, that is um, that is like the life that represents the life that you maybe want to live. Right? If you want to write a book, sit down and write a page. If
Yeah.
you want to get healthier, go for a walk outside. If you want to go find a relationship, maybe you're lonely, go meet one person, go send a text, go to a farmer's market and see people, right? Like commit to the smallest, most whatever you can do to go experience, and then experience it. Like be there, enjoy it, whatever it is, take in the sights, see what you hear, smell whatever is around, feel it, experience it, wear it on, right? Try it on. I say when we have these experiences, right? We what we do is we actually change our perception, right? When if you think about, take like writing a book, for example, right? When you think about writing a book, the only thing you have, and you've never written a book, Kelsey, right? The only thing you have to go from is your perception. So you have what I call perceptual context. The second you write just one page, you then now have experiential context of what it might be to write a book, right? You write a chapter, you have a little bit more, right? You write a 10,000 word manuscript, you have a little bit more. You go through the process of writing an entire book, you have that much more experiential context for you to decide how you want to potentially write a book, or if you want to write a book at all, or if you want to go do something else. But too many of us are trying to make decisions on just squarely perceptual context, and it's hard because again, that fear is right there, and that is the biggest I think emotion that's present when we're trying to make these decisions.
That's such a good answer. For real good answer. I think anybody could take that in and use it. And I love how you turned it right back to me because I want to write a book. And yeah, it's like I'm like I can't wait for that moment out of retreat where the magical idea just downloads into my brain. But nah, I could just spend an hour tonight or fucking 10 minutes and just write for 10 minutes. And that will be the start. So thank you. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I
Cool.
mean, I'm dealing with this thing lately that, well, two things. One, I write about this in my book. I could have written a lot of books by now, but I had a ton of ideas for really, really good books. I was a carpenter in college. That's how I paid for a lot of my school. And I had this idea for a book called The Carpenter because it was a really interesting dynamic of living my days in a very blue collar, interesting environment, and then my nights in the very white collar business school environment. And it just presented a very interesting dynamic, and I wanted to write a book on it. When I moved to California, I wanted to write a book on. It was basically like a guide for Midwest college grads to move to California and create a good life for them. Right? I wanted to write a book that was just sort of like a goofball book, like a book you'd pick up at like a funny gift store, called All the Things I Learned in My 20s. And it was going to be about like how to order Subway properly, not to chase the night, and like
Not to chase the night.
yeah, like little silly things that I just wish I knew in my 20s.
Yeah, nice. I like that.
And those are all fine ideas, but guess what?
They're-
I didn't spend any time writing. So I didn't write any of those books. And it was like, my big realization in the book was like, man, all those things don't exist now because I just didn't spend the time writing. And, even if those things don't get written, at least I would have experienced what it was like to write. And I think that's my new thing is like, I don't even know if I want to be an author until I spend time writing. So I'm at least committing myself to writing, every single week. And if something comes out of it, if one book comes out of it, 10 books, great. If not, I'm at least going to try on writing for size, and I won't have those regrets anymore. And who knows what it'll lead to.
That's so good. Wow. You're really good at being interviewed, by the way. You really are. Yeah, you really are, truly.
Thank
so
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. This is the part of the show, though, where I like to turn it back on my guests once again. And if you feel called to share anything at all, and I'm going to let you let people know where to find you. So this is a different thing. But if you want to ask me a question or don't want to say anything at all, totally up to you.
Oh, I mean, of course I want to ask you a question. I
Oh,
want to ask,
great.
like, I mean, the biggest thing that I'm always wondering is like, okay, what's the latest up to the minute realization of Kelsey, particularly in this pursuit, in your own pursuit of being a self-healer, helping other folks be self-healers? Like, what's on your mind right now that you've learned about this experience?
Well, the only thing coming to my mind is that for the first time in my life, I am all in. And what I just powerfully went all in on recently is this podcast, Sacred Pause, Self Healers Podcast. All in, like all of me is in, all of me. And then I found that when you find that one thing you're all in on, you are inevitably going to go all in on every other part of your life. All 5 buckets. All 5 buckets.
Mm.
And oh my gosh, it's just the best. It's just the best. I'm never going back. And I'm just so excited to see what comes from it. So, like going all in, however that looks to any, I think every
Yeah,
individual knows
you
what
said
all in
to.
means.
I think so, but I think it's worth unpacking a little bit. I would say
Okay.
in two ways. So, A, what does all in look like now? And B, you said it's your first time. What did you mean by that?
So I had a dog walking business in LA. I guess I would say I went all in on that, but it didn't hit fears. It didn't hit insecurities that something like a podcast does.
Mm.
You don't have to put yourself out too much. But for stuff like this, and if you really want to make it big and get into everybody's ears and really help people, you need to put your all of yourself on the line. In other words, you need to get out of the way. Nobody cares about you. This is not about you. Just show up. You know how you were saying show up. So that's what I mean about going all in. And then oh yeah, and
And what does it look
um,
like now? You going all
I'm,
in?
oh, what does it look like now? Yes, it looks like me just fully being me without letting my mind affect myself. And I'm working always, every single moment, working on my mind, managing my mind, because that is the start of everything. That's the start of emotion. Um, so what it looks like now is being aware of everything around me, especially though internally, being fully aware of what's going on internally, especially in my mind. I have a large history of overthinking. So going all in means you're aware of everything going on and you're doing it anyway. And you have like literally, you'll have a list of things that sound so fucking scary, but I'm going to manifest. I'm going to take every action possible to get me there and do it anyway. Even though the weeks leading up to it, the minutes leading up to it, I'm probably going to be anxious and so nervous. I'm going to do it anyway. And I can't wait till I get to the point like your friend where, fears, you don't really feel the fears anymore. They're sort of there, but they don't really like affect your movement. But where I'm at right now is it doesn't look like when I talk to Paige and other friends and family, um, uh, they don't see how I feel inside, which is great. It means like, oh, I'm 50% there, you know? So that's how it looks now. I really hope that made sense because I was like just letting it flow right there.
Oh, it definitely makes sense. Particularly the piece about when you seem to have found some ease of life in your other areas by going all in on this podcast. You've found that you can go all in on other areas of your life. It's sort of kind of an unleashing of Kelsey, dare I say?
Wild,
And that's
wild, wild.
and that yeah, and that's cool. I've found that in my own right. You did make me think of a book. Have you ever read a book called The One Thing?
No. Should I?
It's a great book. It's an easy read too. It's pretty quick. Yeah, it's by Jay Papasan and Gary Keller, the founder of
Okay.
Keller Williams. My friend Alex Gafford, who's in the student of intention community, recommended it, and whew, it's a great book, great read, particularly for I think this stage that you're in.
You said it's called The One Thing.
The One Thing.
Sounds good. Put that on the list. Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for asking me that. That really got the juices flowing. Let me tell you.
No,
Um,
I love it. I love it. On podcasts, guests don't ask enough questions, so I'm glad you gave me the opportunity to ask you a question.
of course. Of course. I've found that that's my favorite part of the show. And a couple seconds leading up to before, like right before I ask it, there's so much resistance inside of me because it's just like, uh-oh, what are they going to do or say? But every time I ask it, like magic happens. So that's just another example of, listening to that part of you. Listen to that. There's two sides of you. What side are you going to lean into, And what side are you going to strengthen? And then what side are you going to weaken? It's all kind of like a fun game. Yeah, it really is.
Fair
Um,
enough.
so for people who want to connect with you deeper and maybe, yeah, get on maybe a subscribe list to your podcast, to your newsletter, read your book when it comes out, how can they find you?
So, I mean, the best thing to do right now is to subscribe to the newsletter. You can get there at studentofintention.substack.com or www.studentofintention.com. I'm redoing my website right now, or I'm actually creating a website for the first time that has all of my links. I think I have a link tree that has them all right
You
now.
do.
So yeah, go there. And then social wise, I'm not great at Instagram. I'm trying to be better at it, but I'm really good at LinkedIn. So I would prefer you follow me there. It's just B Dysart, BDYSART is my
Cool.
profile on LinkedIn. Should be able to find me pretty easy. That's it.
Cool. And then do you have any idea when your book will be launched?
So the book itself is ordered. I have 2,000 copies of the book that have been ordered.
That's so exciting. That's so exciting.
Yes.
Damn.
And then I think it'll be available for the masses in the millions of people waiting for this thing.
Hell yeah.
In September, maybe October, because I'm going to spend July and August rustling up what we'll call a soft launch, getting people to read it, getting people to leave reviews, getting feedback on it, etc. So
I'd love to do that, by the way. Read it, give you a review. That sounds great. So put me on that list.
100%.
Cool. Last but not least, my final question. I like this question too. What does a sacred pause mean to you?
Oh man, a sacred pause. I mean, to me, it's that moment when you're I actually think of it when you're in a circumstance, a situation where you are prone to react, prone to judge the situation or the person. And if you have the awareness to take a sacred pause in that moment, breathe deep, think about whatever it is you need to think about, to remember how lucky you probably are, right? There's definitely some gratitude. There's definitely some love in there that is available. You just got to recognize it. And so if you can take a sacred pause to do just that in that moment of challenge, we'll say, man, I definitely hope I can take a little bit more sacred pauses each and every day.
Oh, I love that answer. I haven't heard that one yet. And that's the most important moment where a sacred pause is needed. So once again, great answer. My goodness. I can't wait to listen to this back. I really can't.
You're just so complimentary. I'm going to listen just so I get all this praise over and over again, and I fill myself with all these good words.
Yeah, and I only you can ask anybody who knows me. I only compliment when I freaking mean it, like for real. So you're welcome.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. And time for the outro. So sad, but also so happy because we just did such a great episode. Thank you, Bobby. But to all our self-healers out there, we are here to remind you, Bobby and I today, that you have everything inside of you to feel better. You have everything inside of you to be your best self and to create the life that you deserve. We love you so much, and we will see you next week.